છેલ્લે
panel of intellectuals, dignitaries, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm good morning to you all. Today, I feel immensely pride in welcoming you all to this particular session of Duilf University International Literature Festival 2026, where words meet worlds. Today, we are present for this particular session titled The General and His Cantonment Days. S. Nair in dialogue with retired General Dr. Manoj Mukund Narwani on his life and books. K.S. Nair has been writing on Indian Air Force and military issues in developing countries for over 20 years. He has published around 100 related articles, including some in American, British, and Japanese publications. He has written 3 books: Ganesha's Fly Boys, on Indian Air Force in Congo in 1960s, The Forgotten Few, on Indian Air Force in World War II, and December in Dhaka, on Indian Armed Forces in Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971. He has contributed to several other books, including Dragon Fire by Pushpinder Singh, in which he contributed bulk of the pre-independence and World War II content. The India-Pakistan Air War 1965 by P.B.S. Jagan Mohan and Samir Chopra, and Burma Air War by Hiroshi Kumamoto. We welcome you, sir. Retired General Dr. Manoj Mukund Narwani is a highly decorated and widely respected leader with over 4 decades of service in the Indian Army, culminating in his appointment as the 28th Chief of the Army Staff. His illustrious military career spans strategic command roles, national security policy making, international diplomacy, teaching, authorship, and thought leadership. A veteran of the Sikh Light Infantry, he has commanded operations along India's most sensitive frontiers, including the western, northeastern, and northern borders, and has served in active peacekeeping and diplomatic roles abroad. General Narwani served as a faculty member at the prestigious Army War College in Mahur, where he mentored senior officers. General Narwani's contributions to defense reforms, counter-terrorism, and military modernization are reflected in his public lectures, academic papers, and keynote addresses across global think tanks and forums. Fluent in multiple languages and now a published author, General Narwani continues to inspire, influence, and lead from beyond the uniform. General Narwani authored his first military fiction novel, The Cantonment Conspiracy, recently. We welcome you, sir. The reporters for the day are Enakshi Rajkua and Simran Singh. So, without any further ado, let us delve into this very exciting session of this morning. Sir, the stage is yours now.
Thank you, madam. And a big thank you to Focal and to the university, to Duilf University for making the platform for all this to happen. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the presence in the audience of General Bahadur, to the chief of the Nepal Army. So, thank you for joining us. Also, as is tradition, the chief of the Nepal Army holds the honorary position of general in the Indian Army. So, we have 2 generals of the Indian Army in this room. I'm very proud of that. And I think it's the first time that Duilf University has hosted an army chief. The Duilf University Literature Festival has hosted Gyanpith Award winners and other very distinguished authors, but it is the first time that we're favored with the presence of army chiefs. So, and it's a real privilege to have you with us, sir. So, as you heard, the brief that we've been given is to talk about the general's life and his book. And I'm very happy to do that, and I'm sure you want to hear more from the General than from me, without any false pride or false modesty. So I will try to let the General speak as much as possible. So we'll start with his book. Since this is a literature festival, I think it's appropriate that we start with hearing a few thoughts from the General on his book. And in particular, I had a few questions which are probably quite standard. General Naravne is now an experienced participant in literature festivals. So the standard questions would be any particular inspirations, sir? And the creation of characters, are they based on real life? I seemed to recognize at least one name among your characters. I'm sure everyone will be interested in your creative process. Do you sit down to write at the same time, at a certain time of day every day? Or does inspiration strike and then you sit and write for hours on end? So those are a few of the starter questions, sir. And please feel free to tell us anything else.
That's a lot of questions in one go. Let me see if I remember them all. Before I start, I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Global University and Focal for inviting me here and giving me this platform to interact with you all. I am no stranger to Assam. In fact, in 42 years that I spent in the army, I was never once posted to Maharashtra, which is my home state. But I had 3 or 4 tenures in Assam, right from Sidli near Bongegaon, Kathiatalli south of Nagaon, Fulbari, Thakurbari, where I commanded my brigade. So I think I know Assam quite well. And I have been to Dibrugarh earlier, almost a decade ago, and as I was mentioning to some of my other guests who have come, I have even seen a movie in Dibrugarh, that long back. And there has been a sea change in Assam over the last decade or so. From when I first visited, in yesterday's keynote address, the ambassador had mentioned about Bogibeel. I have not only crossed the river by ferry 12-13 years ago, but also crossed it on the bridge. So that is how much change has happened in the last decade, how much Assam has progressed. I also remember driving from Nagaon to Bongegaon 10-12 years ago, and throughout the stretch there was not even a single tea shop, let alone a dhaba. That was the state of development in those days. So there has really been a sea change, and that augurs well for not only for Assam but for the country as a whole. So I will not digress too much on Assam and its achievement and get back to the book. So
we have questions about Assam a little later.
So I hope I have not given everything away.
No, sir. There's plenty more to ask you. Please carry on.
Yes, this journey from soldier to storyteller is, of course, a very unique one, I would say. I'm probably the first chief who has written a murder mystery. And obviously this thought comes to everyone's mind. How suddenly did you decide to go on to this line, on this genre? So I feel that why should you always tie yourself down? Why is it that people who retire from government service only have to write serious books? Why can't you write light reading, like this murder mystery? Which some of my friends have said they read it in one afternoon. Nothing serious. So it is meant for light reading, but at the same time, interwoven in the story are many sub-themes and subtexts of honor, justice, the way you react to various situations, and so on and so forth. And we can dwell on those a little bit more as we go along. The idea of this book was there in my mind for many years. The broad plot, it was just a question of translating it into the written word. And again I'm asked that how long did it take you to write this book? So I don't want to, praise myself, but it only took me about 2.5, 3 months. Because that plot was in my mind for so many years that it was just to be typed out.
I think I recognize that, sir, that it's based on years of observation.
An observation, and things that have been, that you have actually been thinking of in your service years. And that is how it
Developed.
As far as any writing time, no particular time. Whenever I find any free time between playing golf, I do my writing.
That's nice to know, sir. As another writer, I sometimes feel that I'm not sufficiently disciplined. I don't sit down every day for a specified number of hours or anything like that. And I'm delighted to hear that you too find the time when you feel like it, essentially. Any particular real-life characters, particularly among the personnel below officer rank? Any characters? Those are the backbone of the army, the JCOs, and I'm. Were there any particular characters whom you've reproduced or whose characteristics you blended into some of your characters?
Nobody is based on a particular character in toto, but obviously the character, especially the commandant and the deputy commandant, who initially are very skeptical or dismissive about the whole case, but when presented with firm evidence, then they rise up and say, yes, we must let justice take its course. So there are mixtures of almost everyone. But the commandant's name is Madan Verma. So Colonel Madan Das was my first CO. So I took Madan from there. And Colonel Verma was my second CO. So I took Verma from there. So that is how Madan Verma's character or name has come about. And in a way, it is my way of repaying them. I cannot, they were so much senior to me. And what I am today is because of them, because of my commanding officer. So this is how I have actually repaid the trust that they reposed in me by making them the major characters.
I think that's a very nice tribute, sir. So I might do something similar. If I ever get around to writing a novel. As some of you may know, I write non-fiction. But somewhere in the back of my head and in the depths of my hard drive, there is the beginnings of a historical novel. So I will take some tips from the general. Sir, continuing on the book is fiction, but as you said, there are some thoughts and ideas in there that are very much based on real life. The soldiers' institutional adherence to Izzat. And we say of the Indian Army that the Indian Army fights for Naam, Namak and Nishan. And I think that driving force comes through in the book. But there's also some of these are literally single lines in the general's novel. But I think they display a couple of opinions. I'm going to ask the general if they represent his real life opinions. So one of them is, in the novel, he makes it clear that women in the armed forces add value. Women in the armed forces bring a wonderful new perspective sometimes. And so that's one of the things that I think emerges from the book, which I'd like to hear his real life take on. And another is that in the book, there's again a very short mention of the Agniveers being trained at the regimental center. And the general says that they show, or the general's the character in the book says that the Agniveers show as much motivation as regular soldiers do. And a third point, which is actually specific, in my mind is specific to the 1971 war. I've made some points about this in my book, in my third book, December in Dhaka, which is that in 1971, Bangladesh actually paid a far heavier price than India did. And we should not forget that. When we tend to treat, we tend to sometimes make public speeches in which it's assumed that Bangladesh owes us something for that. But the reality is that they paid a far heavier price than we did. So these are 3 points that emerge as literally as one-liners here and there in your novels. And I'd like to ask you to what extent they reflect your real life. Women, Agniveers, and Bangladesh.
So we always had women in the armed forces. If you go back in time, they were initially restricted to the medical corps, the Army Medical Corps. By and by, we extended it to the Education Corps and the Judge Advocate General, that is the legal branch, and then to the other supporting services, the engineers, signals, and so on. So it has been a gradual process of opening the doors of the army, a very male-dominated bastion, to the women. And I am of the firm opinion that women constitute 50% of our population. A country cannot progress if it keeps 50% of its population out of the decision-making process or the developmental process and so on. So they have to be part of the body politic. So that is what I was actually trying to get in. And so far women are not there in the infantry. We have the concept of fighting arms, that is the infantry, armored corps and the mechanized infantry and the supporting service. So the women are in the supporting service, they are not in the cutting edge, the fighting arm. So since this is a work of fiction, I have taken the liberty of putting the heroine into the infantry, which is also hopefully a harbinger for us. And once again, through the book I am also paying, as I paid tribute to my CEOs. So I have 2 daughters, so I have always been pro women. And when my daughters were deciding what to do, they said we would like to join the army, but only if we can go to infantry. So of course that door was closed. So in a way, by putting the heroine into the infantry, I am also honoring my daughter's wishes.
Yes, absolutely. That's a nice little snippet, sir. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think we've taken about 20 minutes on the General's book, and I think it might be a good time to turn to the General's life. Our brief is to talk about his book, his life and his book. And the General's life, as he said, he has many connections to Assam, and among others, he has been the IG North of the Assam Rifles. And I think that was a particularly critical role that he discharged long before he became, well, sometime before he became chief. And I'd love to hear more about that experience of yours, sir.
So, as a Major General, I was the Inspector General Assam Rifles North, which is headquartered at Kohima. I had spent almost 2 years there.
A historic place for the Indian Army.
An historic place, the Battle of Kohima and Imphal, in fact, rated by the Britishers as one of the top 10 most important battles that they have ever fought. That was how important this battle was. I can of course talk the whole day about the battle only.
I'd love to hear that, but I think
yes, so
you have a flight to catch.
The tenure in Kohima was definitely interesting. I travelled by road to every nook and cranny, met a wide cross-section of people, not just the governor and chief minister, but even farmers and school teachers in even the bordering districts of Myanmar, Shamato, Kifre, Tuensang. I can rattle them out. Anyone from Nagaland here? Kenika se? Wale se? So, and in fact, I got so engrossed or involved with Nagaland that after retirement I did my PhD on Nagaland. So that's another lesson for you, that learning never ends. It is not that you have got to learn as a student. Learning never ends. If you are passionate about something, you can do it at any time that you want to. And my thesis, if you want to know, was that harmonizing Naga customs, traditions and institutions for the modern era to usher in peace and development. That was the long title, and that was all based on my experience. And in that also there is one point about women. How civil society did not allow the panchayat elections to take place with 33% reservation. There was so much agitation that the then Chief Minister had to resign. It became such a political...
I think I remember that.
So that was my tenure in Kohima. I enjoyed every minute of it.
So may I put in a quick point about the Naga's contribution to Indian military history? I think last year, at the same festival, we had a Naga writer whose name I am not brave enough to pronounce, but the title of his book was His Majesty's Headhunters. And I have a copy. I took his autograph when I had the opportunity to meet him at last year's edition of the festival, and I learned a great deal about Nagaland's history and the history of the Nagas. So there is a book-length tribute to the Nagas, which was represented here at the Dibrugarh International Literature Festival last year. So that must have been a very interesting tenure in your service, and I think we took that up a little outside chronological order. But I'd like to go through the General's life in some kind of chronological order. So, can we start by talking a little about your childhood? Your father was in the Air Force, as mine was, and I'd love to hear from you about your childhood years, the influence of growing up in a services family, seeing your father in uniform, in responsible roles. He commanded an ED, I think, and so yes, indeed. So over to you, sir. Back to you.
Well, you really want me to go back far in time?
We'll put it to the audience. Would you like to hear about the General's childhood? We have a resounding yes.
Well, to start with, as Sri mentioned, my father was in the Air Force, but at heart he was an army man. And in fact, he was a cadet in the Indian Military Academy. But unfortunately, he broke his knee while playing football and was withdrawn. And after that, he continued his education and finally joined the Army, Air Force as a ground duty officer. Since my father was in the Air Force, I wanted to follow in his footsteps and join the Air Force. Unfortunately, I got specs. My eyesight was bad. So I landed up in the army and ended up becoming the chief. That is destiny, Bhagyo. You can't, if that is what has been planned for you, then that is what will happen. But that doesn't mean that you stop studying and say, no, destiny mein pass honga ya nahi hoga. You have to keep working at all times, and then your life and things will unfold. So that is how I
destiny is fine
into the army. And of course my parents had a great role to play. My mother was not very happy that her youngest son, her Ladla, is joining the army. And she asked me a number of times that, are you sure you want to go? I hope you're not going because your father is pressurizing you to join the army and so on and so forth. So she was quite skeptical at first. But when she saw that I'm determined, then she gave 100% support. And there was no doubt thereafter. And my father, of course, being an army man at heart, he always supported me and asked me to do the most challenging things and not to rest on my laurels. And to that extent, I have served everywhere in the country. And perhaps I have not served in the same place twice. Every time I went to a new place. Even my posting in Nagaland was the first time I ever went to Nagaland. So because of that, I had to always challenge myself and to learn and relearn things. And there was never a comfort zone where you could say, oh, I had done this 5 years back, now I know everything. It never was like that. I think that played a very important role in my life.
And you joined service through the NDA, correct, sir? Yeah. And I had the privilege of being hosted at the NDA a few months ago, and it was a phenomenal experience. And the NDA is an incredible academy, and for the, I guess we are mostly university students here, so it's a little too late for them. But the be aware that that is a phenomenal academy, and it produces incredible people in the that who progress into the armed forces.
So we're talking about the NDA was again an all-male bastion. There were no girl cadets in the NDA. And when I went in 2022 for my farewell visit to the NDA, one of the reporters asked me, and that is when the announcement had been made that girl cadets would start joining the NDA from the next batch, that is July of 2022. And they asked me that when do you expect that the first ex-NDA girl cadet will become chief? So I had to do a little bit of maths. I'm not very good at it. And I said it will take only about 50 years for that to happen. But in the book, the heroine, Renuka, is from that first batch of ex-NDA girl cadets who have finished 3 years now in NDA, are currently undergoing the last 1 year training in IMA, and will pass out as commissioned officers in May or June of this year. So my book is actually set in June 26. When I wrote it, it was still quite a long off,
A little in the future,
but it's come. It's happening now.
A little bit of trivia for the audience. The NDA cadets are divided into squadrons, which are identified by letters, and the letters are expanded using a familiar NATO and other countries' clock code. So A is Alpha, B is Bravo, C is Charlie, and so on. The first batch of women cadets at the NDA, the last squadron before the women cadets joined was Q. So the first batch of lady cadets was put into a squadron of their own, and the letter after Q is R, and the expansion of R in the radio code is, sir?
Romeo. Quite apt for all the girls to be Romeo squadron.
It's a nice little bit of trivia to liven up the discussion. And so after you became you were commissioned into the Sikh Light Infantry.
There was another point you made about Bangladesh.
Yes.
So this conversation about Bangladesh happens in an officer mess party. And when I wrote the book, that Bangladesh situation was still quite hot, so to say. So and then they're discussing among themselves that instability in a neighboring country is not good. A point again which was made by the ambassador yesterday. But my idea of getting that into the book was not so much to talk about Bangladesh, but to show that we are not only partying all the time. There's a feeling that army is only partying and drinking and dancing. No, even if we are in a party, we are discussing serious things. Yes, we will talk about sports, we will talk about Netflix and things like that. But at the same time, we are also discussing matters of national interest. So that is why I got that in. It is not only, so as I said, there are many subtexts which I've tried to weave in there. What is the military and what is the army about? It is not what you see, the Dom Dadaka in the movies. There is a lot of depth in each and every army man, what irrespective of his rank.
If I may say so, sir, the layers are visible in your book. It can be read at one level as a simple airport thriller you can finish reading in a sitting, but I thought I saw a great many layers, and I'm glad to hear you confirm some of them. So if we had time, we might take a little longer, but let's go on. After, as we were saying, you were commissioned after NDA and IMA, you were commissioned into the Sikh Light Infantry, a unit with a very strong history of service, and you went on, but you did not directly command a Sikh Light, a unit that was designated the Sikh Light Infantry unit. So would you tell us about your first battalion command? As a little bit of background for everyone, I'll say to you that one of the most famous authors on military issues, Field Marshal Slim, who made his career partly in India during World War II. Field Marshal Slim has written that the most enjoyable commands are a platoon a battalion, a division, and an army. So, your experience as a battalion commander, General sir.
So I was commissioned into the 7th Battalion of the Sikh Light Infantry Regiment, and everybody's aspirations are to be able to command the battalion that you are commissioned in. That is the ambition. Beyond that is again luck. But unfortunately, when the time for turnover was coming, my own battalion was not available. Then CO still had some time to go. So I was sent to command a Rashtra Rifles battalion, and the Rashtra Rifles are all deployed in J&K in the counter-terrorism role. However, the Rashtra Rifle battalions are also affiliated to regiment. So the battalion I commanded was of the Sikh Allied Rashtra Rifles. So it was not as if I was divorced from my troops. My troops remained the same. And an interesting anecdote about Rashtra Rifles, that when it was formed and each battalion had to shed people to the RR, the battalions thought it's a very good idea to get rid of all the troublemakers. Send them all to RR. So from 7 Sikhalai, I also sent my troublemakers there. So when I landed up there, they were giving me knowing looks. To see me, Saab, that you are also the troublemaker who's come to RR. So they were giving me knowing looks that you are one of us only.
I can imagine.
So that was the most enjoyable tenure that I ever had as a battalion.
I'm sure it was, and you still light up when you talk about that period. And another little bit of trivia about 7th Sikh Light Infantry. If I'm not mistaken, the first gallantry award to an Agniveer has gone to an Agniveer of 7th Battalion Sikh Light Infantry.
Yeah, that's one point which got left out in the series of questions. That there are conflicting views and reports and feedback that you get on the Agnipath scheme, and the Agniveers were inducted as part of that scheme. So there is no difference between the soldiers, and the Agniveers have proved their worth, and as you mentioned, that they even got gallantry awards within the first 2-3 years of their service. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with the new policy that has been enacted by the government. But any policy which is made is never 100% correct at the time that it is rolled out. So there will always be room for improvement, for changes. And I again always give the example of our constitution. It was not 100% correct. There have been over 100 amendments to the constitution to make it more vibrant, to make it better, to serve the interests of the people in a better way. Similarly, if some changes to the scheme are warranted, I'm sure those who are in the chair today and who are in the decision-making process will take into account all these factors and bring about those changes as and when required.
Indeed, sir. That's reassuring. Going back to, again, speaking about your time as a battalion commander, you received the Sena Medal during your period as a battalion commander. Would you care to tell us a little bit about the circumstances around that? And I know they were. I know that you say that it was an award to all of your unit rather than to you yourself. But that could be said of many leadership awards. So, would you care to expand on that?
Well, yes. So, Sena medals are also of two types. One is Sena Medal Gallantry, which the first Agniveer got for gallantry in the face of the enemy, putting down terrorists. And one is the Sena Medal for Distinguished Service. So that is what I have got. So the Sena Medal for Distinguished Service for recognition of the work done by my unit during the time that I was in command between 2000 and 2003. That is the time post-Kargil, where insurgency and terrorism had again reared its head in the valley. Those were the difficult times. That is the time when the first suicide attacks, Fedayeen attacks took place. And the whole valley was actually once again in flames. That is where all the RR battalions had a big role to play in getting the situation back under control. And it is because my unit did a lot of good operations. Great many of my unit personnel got gallantry awards. More than 50 gallantry awards just in that 2.5, 3-year tenure that I was there. So we used to be in double-digit figures every 6 months. And of course, because my unit has done well, I also was recognized. So, but as I said, you cannot award everyone. It's not that 10 people go in an operation and all 10 will get a Sena. One person gets it. The person who gets it is actually representative. So you cannot give 1,200 people of the battalion. So you give it to the CO, which is a recognition of the work done by all 12.
It's a very, it's a wonderful example of how you've taken the award and the recognition that comes with it, and the general sense in the army, in the armed forces, the unity and of a unit, and I've seen examples of it even not being in the service myself. I've seen plenty of examples, and thank you for sharing that with us, sir. And after we have a very distinguished author among us, so I will ask the volunteers to please escort. Thank you for joining us, sir. And, so I was going to ask you, sir, not long after your battalion command, you had an opportunity to serve as a military attaché overseas, and that I understand it led to many changes in your life, in your personal and professional life. So could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I'm not sure whether it led to many changes, but yes, I was the defense attaché in Myanmar, another very important neighboring country with whom we share a long border, 1643 kilometers. That was the time when it was still under military rule, and it was the run-up for the first general elections, which happened in 2010. So the country was gearing up for that. Unfortunately, after 2 general elections, in 2020, again went back to the old system, but now again elections have been held, and a democratic government would soon be in place. There are many views that it is a sham election, that the government doesn't really have control over half the country, and that may be so. I am not disputing those views. But when I was there in 2010, and the run-up to the elections, and they also made a party, the USDA, which was sort of the political front
proxy for the military.
So then too, these thoughts were there in the mind. But then when I was speaking to the people, and I always made it a point not to just speak to the diplomatic community, and but to my god partner, for example. He was a normal Myanmar citizen. So they used to say that something is better than nothing. At least we have 50% democracy.
Some kind of representation.
At least, and it will improve extent. So that was the view then. And I'm sure that would be the general sentiment even now. That at least let's take some baby steps forward rather than just being under military rule. So that is how I view it. Although the situation I would not say is 100% what we would like it to be, but it is a step forward.
Certainly. And I think if I can take a moment again to speak about my own experiences, I made my first visit to Myanmar last year, which is strange because I've written books about the Indian Army in Burma, about the Indian Armed Forces in Burma. And there is a feeling among military historians that you should never write about a battle without having walked the land over which it was fought. And I had my first opportunity last year, and I can say that I heard a lot of very freely expressed views about wanting to see a change in government, but there was no sign of, or there was, it all seemed as though there was a certain expectation of improvement with the elections, even if it was not entirely a completely what many observers might criticize as not a completely free and fair election. There was optimism about the results.
So you have to make a slight distinction between the military government and the military personnel. The military personnel who are manning the borders, we still have to have good relations with them, irrespective of who's there at the top.
And they have supported us.
Yes, when the dispensation changes, we still have to meet them. So we can't say we will stop talking to the army guy who is across the border.
Indeed.
We still have to maintain good relations. So that distinction has to be understood. When people ask that why you're still engaging with the Myanmar military. They confuse me. We are not engaging with the leadership. So there's the difference between the two.
I think I see that difference. And they have cooperated with the Indian Army on some occasions, and it's been very useful for us. I think anything else you'd like to share with us? We'll take another 5 minutes or so on your life, and then we'll go to a couple of specific questions that I shared with you earlier, and then we'll you have a film. The general is sharing with us a film about the Indian Army.
So I'll take a breather while I show you a short video. Yes. And then we can have the Q&A session.
Certainly. Yeah, we have, we're making very good time. According to the original schedule, at least we're in right time. So. In fact, we're 2 minutes early.
gentlemen, that is your army, the Indian Army, Bharat ki Sena, Bharatiya Sena. So you should feel proud as a country that this is what we are capable of.
We cut to the video about 2 minutes ahead of the schedule I had mentally mapped out. So if I can just ask you 2 more quick questions. One was about the impact of technology on modern warfare, and you briefly mentioned to me some of your thoughts. So could you share that with the audience?
So of late, because of increased reach of media and things like that, there is a feeling that technology is something which has come into warfare recently. That is not so. Technology in warfare has always been there. When gunpowder was invented, that was the cutting edge of technology at that point of time. It's not as if now, because of increased awareness, we feel that technology has made deep inroads into the realm of warfare. But as I said, that has always been the case. Whether it is gunpowder, whether it was the advent of air power, which is battle winning factor these days, and now it has gone into the realm of unarmed or unmanned systems, the UAVs, the drones. So these things keep changing, and along with this technology is coming in, the character of war also keeps changing. That is how the operations are prosecuted. That will keep changing, and whichever side is able to adopt the technology faster and adapt it to their doctrines and strategy and the ground level tactic, that side will emerge the winner. So that is the challenge, the quick absorption of that technology and converting it into a battle winning tactic. But remember that technology is neutral. You have it, your adversary also has the same thing. It is how you make use of it which makes the difference.
Tracer fire works both ways. So I think that's a line that always struck me since I first heard it, and agree. And you put it, you make the same point in different words. But the other sort of old military saying which applies there is, I think that the nature of war fighting may change, but the character of war, the other way around. The character of
the nature of war doesn't change, the character of war changes.
Indeed.
The nature of war is kill or be killed. There is no difference in that. It is the character, how it is being prosecuted, whether by horseback or by walking people on tanks, on air, unmanned systems. That is how it is changing. If I were to put it in a term which you can understand a little better, take the example of time. What is the time now? 11:05. In the army, we'll say 11:05. Or if it's 1100 hours. If it is 1 p.m., we'll say 1300 hours. You could be seeing the time on a digital watch, you could be seeing it on a wall clock. But the time of 1300 has remained the same. That has not changed. So that is the nature of war. That is constant. How it is happening, the time, how you are seeing it, that is what is
a sundial or a
so much
hourglass
changes.
Or an analog watch.
So that is the crux of the matter. The character is ever evolving, and you have to adapt to those.
And you're confident that the Indian Army is absorbing it, as we saw.
It is a misnomer that our men are any less adept at technology. In fact, whenever I have a problem or used to have a problem with my mobile phone, I used to give it to my buddy. देखना जरा इसके साथ क्या करना. He would took and give it back.
I've seen that.
He was more adept at the mobile than I was.
I saw that last year. I was privileged to interview about 30 veterans of the 1965 war for production that was being put together by USI in September, which is the 60th anniversary. So I had to go to a number of different places, and sometimes the recording was in a services establishment. And the officer who was in charge or who was looking after me, always very helpful. But when it came to hooking up the recording equipment,
so our men are very tech savvy, so there is no reason to believe that they will not be able to absorb anything new which comes up, especially now that AI summit is going on in New Delhi.
Indeed.
It is going to throw up many new products and many new ways to
I have a couple of friends there.
improve our battle winning strategies. So we will invite them.
I have a couple of friends there, one of whom is an Air Force squadron leader who was invalided out after an ejection and is doing some very interesting work for the armed forces. Anyway, sir, one last question before we start the Q&A, and it's really quite an open question. What comes next for you? I have an inkling that you've shared with me, so can you share with the audience?
Well, I'm already working on the sequel to this book, The Cantonment Conspiracy. Almost in the finishing stages. By sequel, I mean that the hero and heroine are the same, but obviously the mystery is going to be different, and you will be glad to know that it is set in Arunachal. So I've moved out to where we are, quite close to where we are now. And again, my idea is that I will write a series of books and each would be in a different part of the country. So the idea is also through the book to inform the citizens of our border areas and so on and so forth. So that is the aim plus, you could say, and it should be going to the publishers any time for a release sometime next year.
The general used the phrase aim plus, and that's a characteristically army phrase that's used when somebody achieves more than the objective that was given to him. And one of the classic examples of that is Lieutenant General Sagat Singh in 1971, who achieved more than his CNC General Arora had asked him to accomplish, and it transformed the war. There's no question about that. So I look forward to seeing General Naravne do the same for military fiction for us in India. A couple of guidance points before we we let the audience put some questions. I will ask you to put the questions directly to me, and we'll take 3 at a time for the general to complete. And
questions to you in written form?
no, you can put them to me, but I will I'll try to reduce them to we'll come right there. And on a personal note, I'll just ask my volunteer, Sanjana, if you can just bring my bag to me. There's something in the bag that I want the general to autograph. So without affecting the flow of the
That is to give me time to think.
How did you guess, sir? So, clearly, our generals are very thoughtful people. Thank you, Sanjana. So right, I'll also say the other guiding line is the general has a flight to catch and some administrative chores in the author's lounge before he leaves. So when we call time at 11:15, we call time. So there it is. And right, I have 2 questions. I have several questions in the front row. I'd really like to give some priority to the students. So I'll ask those in the front row to hold your questions for a couple of minutes while we get some from the students. I saw one there. Go ahead, please. Do we need a mic? Or in this classroom, maybe we don't need a mic.
Sir,
Please go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. The first question is, in between India and China, we saw 1962, then 67. Then it paused for some time. 2017 happened in Dokla, and then 2020 we saw Gulf. So what is the motive of China? And why this pause? 67 to 2007. There is a pause.
Okay, I made a note of that. There were 2 questions, I think, from the real.
I have also 2 questions. So discipline is very important factor of Indian Army. So as a management student, we require for discipline. So what is the mantra of discipline? So my next question is on a recent book, The 4-Star Destiny. वो अभी तक publish नहीं हुआ है क्या? वो अभी नहीं आएगा क्या? वो stop.
Right. Any other questions from the students? Yeah. All right, Aisha.
So, as you mentioned about your neighboring countries, which is Bangladesh and Myanmar, as mentioned in the book as well, but there is also one neighboring country, which is of course the China. If you can elaborate and throw light and give us a clear your experience in 2020.
Right. So I think shall we start on the answer? So the first one was, 3 out of the 4 questions have to do with China. So
I think we'll finish off the China part first. The other question, which is of management and HR,
we'll leave that.
and leadership, we can club it with some other questions of that type, which are bound to come, I suppose. So yes, China is a very important neighbor of ours, with whom we have had a troubled relationship time to time. But we have to understand that this problem that we are having is because of the unresolved nature of the boundary between the two countries. And I use this word boundary with extra emphasis because we very often tend to use the word border and boundary very interchangeably, but they are not the same. When you say there is a border between two countries, like the border between India and Bangladesh, it is a well-recognized boundary, recognized by both the countries, which is marked on a map, and boundary pillars put on the ground. And on the boundary pillars, one side is written India and one side is written Bangladesh. That means everything lying on that side belongs to you, and everything on the other side belongs to Bangladesh. So that is the implication of a border. A boundary, on the other hand, is a very nebulous concept. It is a boundary. It is notional. It is not demarcated. Both countries don't agree where the boundary lies. It is not marked on any map, let alone boundary pillars anywhere. So that is the genesis of the problem, and why from time to time, when these differences of opinion arise, we have clashes along various parts of this boundary, whether it is in eastern Ladakh, whether it is the central sector adjoining Nepal, whether it is in Sikkim, whether it is in Arunachal. So there are so many places, and it has been happening in the past, and it will happen in the future also when the two opposing sides come too close to each other. But to avoid these things from happening, there are a number of agreements between the two countries. The Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement, the Agreement on Confidence Building Measures, and so on and so on, which try to establish protocols because of which things should not spiral out of control. Can this problem be solved? The boundary question, yes, why not? Through dialogue and discussion, it can definitely be solved. If you could solve such a vexatious problem in Bangladesh in 2015, the land border agreement, there was a give and take.
There was exchange of territory.
Exchange of territories, the enclaves which were in adverse possession. And in fact, as a result of this agreement, India gave away more than they had got. I forget the exact figures now, but if we gave away, say, 7,000 acres, we got only 1,000 in return. But we did that in good faith or having good relations with our neighbors. So it is not that this boundary issue cannot be resolved. It can be resolved, but it has to be resolved through dialogue and discussion, which has been India's very principal stand all along, right from the beginning, that unilateral use of force will not be accepted.
So can we take the question on discipline?
Any other question related to HR?
Right, let's take. We'll go from right to left as you are seeing it. Sir.
My question is very short, and I don't know whether I should ask or not. Recently, your book, that is memoir, is to be published, but there is fear in a political realm, but you are silent on it.
The Speaker of the Lok Sabha says that book doesn't exist. Kalon. Kalon.
Yeah. My name is Kalon Bhattacharjee. I'm a journalist as well as an author. I work with the Hindu newspaper. You mentioned the situation in Myanmar. we are of course close to Bangladesh, being right here today. We have a situation also in Nepal where interim government is functioning. Just a few days back we had an election in Bangladesh where an interim government's tenure is came to an end. Given the situation that the South Asian region finds itself in, especially in the context of what's happening with Pakistan, and then with of course the Af-Pak theatre heating up, and you dealt with the Galwan clashes yourself, is our current strategic posture in need of some overhaul? That's what I want to ask. You know, given the overall turmoil that's happening in the region, I mean, is our strategic posture in need of an overhaul?
Before the general answers, I'll give Kalol a bit of backing and say that Kalol has recently produced a couple of the best written and best informed op-eds that I have seen about the recent elections in Bangladesh and the history of the BNP, which is now.
I have a comment back.
There was a question behind you, Brigadier Sir. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sir, good morning.
In the interest of gender equality, we'll have one boy and one girl.
Good point.
Good morning. Sir, myself a faculty of Mechanical Engineering Department. So I would like to know, sir, what is your suggestions for us to develop our students for developing maybe some projects, we do BTech projects, so engineering projects. So what is your suggestion, like can we provide some kind of any focus on developing drone, like technology like drone, which is now quite, or anti-drone systems which are quite relevant now. So what are your suggestions that you can guide your students according to your available solutions?
One question from a lady.
So again, coming back to the same, because we genuinely want to know your situation and your experience in 2020, and regarding to this also, because in a previous interview where you have mentioned that not an inch of the Indian land has been taken by the Chinese, do you still need that inside?
First you tell me where the boundary is, show it to me on the map, show it to me on the ground.
Boundaries are accepted by both.
And we will say whether anything has been taken or not taken. So that is exactly where the problem lies. As far as your question is concerned, that how can you contribute? The armed forces, both Air Force, Navy and the Army, have various portals and websites where we put out our challenges as to what we require. So that is the best place to go to, where you will find out what are the futuristic requirements that the Army is looking at, whether in terms of unmanned systems, whether in terms of various kinds of software, and then that can be in partnership or in collaboration with them, that can be developed. There is also a system where the Army will help when you are a university yourself. You don't require that help. But when individuals approach us, then we help them to get in touch with a university of repute, whether it is a IIT, whether it is a Madras University, so that they get that university backing and the access to the lab and the research facilities, so that they can develop their project better. So that is where we should first contact, and there is what is called the IDEX, Innovation in Defense Excellence. There is the industrial challenge. So we throw out challenges, see which is the best response that we get, and whichever best responses come and product, then we even give that person a little amount of funding. Because startups really require that. What they require is funding. So we give that funding as part of that startup challenge, so that they can develop a product which meets our requirement. So there is a lot which can be done in this regard.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we promised you 15 minutes of Q&A. We've actually given you 20 minutes. So I'm going to call time now. And thank you all for participating and for recognizing the two generals whom we have here today. And so thank you as always to Focal and to Dibrugarh University, and special thanks to our guest.
Thank you everyone, and thank you also to Focal. I think I forgot to mention them in my initial introductory remarks. Thank you everyone. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And I renew my request. Please don't crowd the general, because he does have to go around he does have a flight to catch and a couple of administrative chores before he finishes.
So this is what the book looks like.
While the general signs the autograph, I thank everyone for being such a patient listener and having such an enriching discussion. I'm pretty sure all of us who will leave the hall today will be much enriched in our knowledge base, will be much enriched from the conversation that we just had with both these distinguished personalities. I thank Sri Sir for asking all the right questions and General Sir for answering them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone.